TV7 Israel News is made possible thanks to your generous donations. Shalom, good evening. This is TV7 Israel News, broadcast to you from Jerusalem. And in today's top stories, Israel entered into the fifth day of war as regional tensions intensify. The United States warns the enemies of Israel not to exploit the war with Gaza as northern cross-border attacks escalate. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu voices gratitude for U.S. support for Israel in its time of need. Israel entered into the fifth day of war since the murderous Islamist terror organizations from Gaza penetrated Israeli territory and committed abhorrent massacres against civilians. Casualty figures continue to rise. As of this moment, Israeli authorities confirmed over 1,200 murdered, including nearly 1,000 civilians and more than 3,000 wounded as a result of the unprovoked massacre which the Palestinian terror groups inflicted upon southern Israel. Meanwhile, in Washington, U.S. President Joe Biden made a public address vis-a-vis the heinous crimes which the Palestinian terror groups committed against humanity.
You know, there are moments in this life, and I mean this literally, when the pure, unadulterated evil is unleashed on this world. The people of Israel lived through one such moment this weekend. The bloody hands of the terrorist organization Hamas, a group whose stated purpose for being is to kill Jews. This was an act of sheer evil.
President Biden went on to highlight the brutality and bloodthirsty actions by Hamas that do not put the atrocities committed by the Islamic State to shame.
There's still so many families desperately waiting to hear the fate of their loved ones, not knowing if they're alive or dead or hostages. Infants in their mother's arms, grandparents in wheelchairs, Holocaust survivors abducted and held hostage. Hostages whom Hamas has now threatened to execute in violation of every code of human morality. It's abhorrent. The brutality of Hamas, these bloodthirstiness brings to mind the worst rampages of ISIS. This is terrorism. But sadly, for the Jewish people, it's not new.
It is important to highlight that alongside Israeli hostages, which include infants, children, and elderly, a number of foreign nationals were also abducted by Hamas, including a number of Germans, Austrians, and Americans, among others.
So in this moment, we must be crystal clear. We stand with Israel. We stand with Israel. And we will make sure Israel has what it needs to take care of its citizens, defend itself, and respond to this attack. There's no justification for terrorism. There's no excuse. Hamas does not stand for the Palestinian people's right to dignity and self-determination. Its stated purpose is the annihilation of the state of Israel and the murder of Jewish people. They use Palestinian civilians as human shields. Hamas offers nothing but terror and bloodshed with no regard to who pays the price.
The American president went on to pledge additional U.S. support for Israel in its war on terror.
We're surging additional military assistance, including ammunition and interceptors, to replenish Iron Dome. We're going to make sure that Israel does not run out of these critical assets to defend its cities and its citizens.
President Biden further underscored the deployment of U.S. forces to the region and relayed an unequivocal message to the enemies of Israel and the United States.
The United States has also enhanced our military force posture in the region to strengthen our deterrence. The Department of Defense has moved the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group to the Eastern Mediterranean and bolstered our fighter aircraft presence. And we stand ready to move in additional assets as needed. Let me say again, to any country, any organization, anyone thinking of taking advantage of this situation, I have one word: don't. Don't. Our hearts may be broken, but our resolve is clear.
It is important to highlight that the USS Gerald R. Ford carrier strike group has arrived in the eastern Mediterranean, while in tandem, the first plane of American military aid has landed at a military base in the country late last night. And while the armaments provided to Israel aim to ensure that the IDF has sufficient munitions to contend with all sectors which it may face, the deployment of forces are not intended to assist Israel in destroying Hamas, which the IDF can do on its own.
The President has been deeply engaged in giving direction to his national security team to take action to support Israel in its hour of need. At his direction, the United States has surged ammunition and interceptors for Iron Dome, and the President spoke with Prime Minister Netanyahu just a little while ago to talk about additional capabilities that Israel will need, and he pledged that American planes will be landing in Israel with those capabilities in the days ahead. And now, at the direction of the President, we are working with Congress to make sure that Israel maintains supply of these critical assets to defend its cities and its citizens, as well as the many U.S. citizens who live, work, and travel in Israel. Also at President Biden's direction, the U.S. military has enhanced its force posture in the region to strengthen our deterrence, including the movement of a carrier strike group into the eastern Mediterranean, and we are prepared to move additional assets as necessary. Let me be clear, we did not move the carrier for Hamas. We moved the carrier to send a clear message of deterrence to other states or non-state actors that might seek to widen this war. The President has also tasked us with engaging in contingency planning for any and all escalation scenarios, and we are now deeply engaged in that planning, and we are consulting with allies and partners as well about all of the potential scenarios that might unfold in the days ahead. Let me repeat what we've now said many times and what the President said just a short while ago, so that everyone, including enemies who are thinking of exploiting the current situation, hear it loud and clear. The United States has always and will always have Israel's back.
Meanwhile, during their Affair 2 phone call, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu thanked President Joe Biden, as well as the American people, for their unequivocal support for the Jewish state in the face of Islamist atrocities.
Mr. President Joe, I want to thank you for your continued and unequivocal support and the work of your entire administration to support us. Joe, I want to give you a clear picture of the difficult situation we face. We were struck Saturday by an attack whose savagery I can say we have not seen since the Holocaust. I mean, we had hundreds massacred, families wiped out in their beds in their homes, women brutally raped and murdered, over 100 kidnapped, including children. And since we last spoke, the extent of this evil, it's only gotten worse. They took dozens of children, bound them up, burned them, and executed them. They beheaded soldiers. They mowed down these youngsters who came to a nature festival and just, like, put 5 jeeps around a depression in the soil, and like Babi Yar, they mowed them down, making sure that they killed everybody. We've never seen such savagery in the history of the state, and they're even worse than ISIS. They're even worse than ISIS, and we need to treat them as such.
It is important to know that the IDF has managed to regain control of Israeli territory, eliminating over 1,000 terrorists within southern Israel.
We are stabilizing the situation, the destruction of many terrorists. We began with difficult results. Nonetheless, we are doing great work. Much appreciation. Go work. We still have a lot to do.
Alongside operational activity to sterilize southern Israel from remaining terror cells, the IDF has seemingly intensified its aerial strikes on terror infrastructure throughout the Hamas-controlled Gaza Strip, inflicting destruction upon any structure utilized to store weaponry or terrorists, which Hamas deliberately places within densely populated areas. Meanwhile, former Hamas political chief Khalid Mash'al, who is among Hamas's leadership, who will ultimately be eliminated, held a televised address calling on the forces of Islam, as he put it, to unite against Israel.
We are facing the moment of truth. And here I say clearly, without hesitation, this is the moment for the Muslim nation to join in the fight, to fight with them. I call firstly the surrounding countries, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Egypt, all of its sons and daughters, officially and popularly. Your duty is bigger because you are closer to Palestine.
While hundreds of Palestinians residing in Jordan flooded the streets of Jordanian cities in support of the Islamist Hamas, calling for Israel's destruction, Hezbollah has evidently intensified sporadic cross-border attacks which it mounted against Israel from Lebanese territory. Consequently, Israel retaliated by artillery and aerial bombardments along the border, killing a number of Hezbollah operatives. Separately in Syria, mortar shells were fired toward Israel's northern communities, drawing an Israeli retaliatory response against military and terror infrastructure in the border's vicinity. Thankfully, no Israeli casualties were reported in either incident. Nevertheless, Hezbollah's activities are increasing the likelihood of miscalculation that could spiral into multi-sector conflict. Thank you for watching TV7 Israel News. I'd like to encourage you, pray for the peace of Jerusalem and salvation of Israel during these times of strife. Moreover, if you're blessed by our productions and would like to help us bear the costs, since TV7 Israel is 100% donation-based, please consider making a donation. You can do so by visiting our website at www.tv7israelnews.com. I'm Jonathan Hassan, wishing you an Erev Mevorach, and we will see you again during our upcoming productions. Until then, Shalom.